Welcome to this deep dive. We'll be looking into people who, well, they believe they almost disappeared or had really strange, hard to explain experiences with reality shifting around them. We're going to be sticking to firsthand accounts and really grounding everything we talk about in the facts as they're presented.
Yeah.
So we've got some pretty interesting things to cover today, like a rock that vanished, a path that shifted around, and even maybe an encounter with a creature straight out of myth.
Yeah, it's really something how these stories always seem to pop up in the lives of normal people just going about their day. Like the unexplained just slams into the ordinary. And that's what makes it so interesting to think about, you know? Is there more to what we see than we realize?
Totally. So let's get started with our first story. It takes us to Newfoundland, Canada in 1925. We've got Roland O'Connor and his brother out on a hunting trip. They're on the Avalon Peninsula. And as the sun starts to set, Roland decides to get one last hunt in before the day is over. So he takes off on his horse with his dog and heads into an area he knows really well. But what started as a normal hunt turns into something much weirder.
Right. So from what Roland said, his horse starts acting really strange, like it didn't want to go forward. And Roland, he starts hearing these strange noises, almost like whispers. Then this feeling of being completely lost, totally disoriented, washes over him. And then suddenly, everything around him is different. It's a landscape he doesn't recognize at all, with thick trees and rocks that were completely new to him. And this is despite him knowing the area really well and the path totally on.
Wow, that's crazy. I can't imagine being in a place you don't know, especially as night's coming. What did Roland do?
Well, he was getting pretty worried. It was getting darker and darker. So he shot his rifle a few times, hoping his brother would hear and come looking for him. But nothing. No answer. So as night fell, he decided to just wait till morning. He found a big rock to lean against. And the next thing he knows, he's waking up on the ground and everything's back to normal.
So the place he knew was back.
Yep. The path was back, but the rock, the one he was leaning on, it was gone. He rode back to camp and found his brother, who was obviously really worried. He'd been searching all night, shooting his own rifle and calling out Roland's name.
Did Roland hear any of that while he was, gone?
Nope, not a thing. And that's what makes this even weirder. Roland's brother said he'd searched the same path where Roland disappeared, even going further than where Roland woke up. He was sure he would found him if Roland had been there, but there was just nothing. No sign at all.
So they were both in the same area, but what they experienced during that time was totally different. Roland's there one minute, gone the next, even though his brother's searching for him.
Exactly. This difference in what they experienced, the sudden change in the environment, the lost time, it's like Roland slipped through some kind of crack in reality, vanished from how things were supposed to happen. I mean, yeah, maybe it could be explained by normal things, getting lost, weird weather, things like that, but when you look at the specifics of what happened, it's not so simple.
It definitely leaves you with more questions than answers. And the fact that his brother searched the same path and found nothing, that just makes it even more mysterious. Okay, so let's move on to our second story. This one, it's also in Newfoundland, but fast forward to 1988. It's about this guy, Jim Lynch. He says he experienced a time slip. So what about this Jim Lynch and what happened to him?
So Jim Lynch, he had this cabin way out in a remote part of Newfoundland. He would spend his weekends there a lot. And one weekend, he was gathering firewood when he saw something he couldn't explain. He was walking along a path he knew super well, like he'd walked it a million times before. Then he noticed something weird.
What did he see?
There was this branch leading off the main path where there hadn't been one before. He just figured someone was working in the area at first. But then, as he kept walking, he saw another new branch going off in a different direction. It was like the path was changing as he walked along it.
Whoa, wait, so the path was actually shifting around him as he walked? I can't even picture that.
That's exactly how he described it. Jim was curious, but also felt kind of uneasy. So he decided to follow this new path, and it took him to the edge of a cliff that he'd never seen before, even though he knew the area really well. And that's when things got even stranger.
What happened at the cliff?
He's standing there, taking in this view he's never seen before, and all of a sudden it was just night. It wasn't like the sun slowly setting, it was like someone just turned off the lights. Total darkness.
And how long had he been away from his cabin at this point?
He thought it had only been like 30 minutes, but when he finally got back to the cabin, his friends who were visiting had been out looking for him for hours. They were getting really worried.
So a 30-minute walk for him turned into hours for his friends. That's a huge difference in how much time passed. It's like he stepped out of time for a bit, and when he came back, way more time had passed than he'd experienced.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. And get this, when his friends went back to look for those new paths, they were gone. Just like in Roland's story, Jim's experience seems to show that how he perceived time and space was different from what everyone else experienced.
These stories are really messing with how we think about time and space, huh? It's like there are these hidden parts of reality or even other realities that we can stumble into, and then boom, we're back in our normal world.
And up next, we're leaving Newfoundland and heading to Peru. We're going to hear a story that's tied to folklore and myth. It's about a young girl and her encounter with something unexplainable.
All right, let's hear about it.
This story is about a little girl. She's 7 years old, and she's playing with her friends outside her grandma's house in a village in Peru. Seems pretty normal, right? Just kids being kids. But then things start to get really mysterious.
What happened to this girl that makes her story so different?
Well, the jungle wasn't far from her grandma's house. You know, for a kid, the jungle's this huge, exciting place. So as the girl is playing, she spots this tiny white chick at the edge of the jungle. It catches her eye, and being a kid, she wants to play with it. So she wanders off to catch it, thinking it's all just innocent fun. But it takes her somewhere she didn't expect at all.
So she follows this chick into the jungle. At first, it doesn't seem like a big deal. What happened next?
So she's following this chick, going deeper and deeper into the jungle, and she ends up getting separated from her friends. It starts to get dark, dusk is setting in. And she's all alone in this unfamiliar place. But she finally catches the chick, she's holding it, enjoying how soft it feels. Then something really freaky happens. She feels this sharp tug on her hair from behind, and then these slaps, like someone's shaking her hard. She opens her eyes, all confused, and it's her grandma standing over her, looking really angry.
Whoa, that's a scary jump. It's like she's in a movie. One minute she's chasing this chick and it's peaceful, the next she's being shaken awake by her angry grandma.
Yeah, it really shows how quickly things can turn scary, even when they seem innocent at first. And her grandma, she tells the girl in this really serious voice that she was almost taken by the Pombero.
We talked a little about the Pombero before. Can you remind us who this figure is in Peruvian folklore and how it connects to the story?
Right, so the Pombero is this mythical creature. People say he's this small, hairy being that lives in forests and jungles. He's usually seen as mischievous and tricky, but sometimes he's connected to scarier things. In this story, the girl's grandma really believes that the Pombero lured her granddaughter deep into the jungle.
That's terrifying. Did the girl actually see the Pombero? Or was it more like the grandma's way of explaining what happened?
The story doesn't say if the girl saw the Pombero, but there's another part to the story that makes it even creepier. When the girl realizes what's going on, after her grandma finds her, she notices she's not near her house anymore. She's deep in the jungle. And it's full-on nighttime, even though it was just dusk a little while ago. Her grandma and a bunch of villagers are there with her, holding lanterns, looking really worried.
So just like Roland O'Connor in the first story, she experienced lost time. That's a crazy connection.
Mm-hmm.
She goes from chasing a chick at dusk to being deep in the jungle in the middle of the night, surrounded by people. It's like she teleported, or maybe her sense of time was messed up somehow.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. That disconnect between how she experiences time and what's actually happening is what makes this so interesting. Her grandma said they were searching for her for hours and finally found her just standing there on a jungle path, like she was in a trance.
It's pretty chilling to think about her just standing there in the dark, lost in the jungle, with no idea how much time had gone by. And then the grandma's convinced it was the Pombero. It really makes you think about how cultural beliefs and folklore shape how we see the unexplained. Could it be that the girl, being scared of the Pombero from stories she'd heard, somehow made it happen?
That's a good question. We often use folklore to make sense of things we don't understand, to explain the things that don't fit in with our normal way of thinking. In this case, the Pombero is more than just a myth. He represents the unknown, the dangers that are out there, the things that scare us in the dark.
It reminds us that how we see reality is shaped by lots of things. What our culture believes, what we've experienced, even our own fears. We've looked at 3 stories now from totally different places, each with its own details and cultural background. But there's some pretty big similarities between them, too.
Definitely. They all have this element of surprise, of the unexplained suddenly popping up in these people's normal lives. They weren't looking for something strange to happen. They were just hunting, getting firewood, playing, and then, bam, something happens that they can't explain.
And it's not just that these things happened out of the blue, it's also the effect they had on these people. They were left confused and shaken, having to question what they thought was real. They couldn't just shrug it off or come up with a logical reason.
And even though the stories are different, there's this one theme that runs through them all. Something messed up the normal way time and space work. You have the vanishing rock, the paths that move, and the feeling of lost time. It's almost like what we know about time and space isn't the whole story.
Like glitches in the system, right? Moments where reality tears or bends and these weird and confusing things can happen.
And it's really interesting that none of these people were trying to have these experiences. It just happened to them. Makes you wonder if we could all have those moments where things get disrupted, whether we know it or not. That's a really cool idea. It makes you think that maybe there's way more to reality than what we see, that our world is just one layer of something much bigger and more complex.
It's kind of humbling, but also exciting to think about these hidden dimensions or alternate realities that might be right there, just out of reach. And every now and then, they show themselves to us in these strange, fleeting moments. We've explored 3 stories that give us a glimpse into the unexplained, but there are so many more out there just waiting to be found and explored.
It really makes you think, huh, like all these stories, they kind of remind us that we don't know everything about the universe. There's always something new to learn, something else to explore. And it's by looking at these stories, questioning what we think we know and staying open to new ideas. That's how we can push the limits of what we know and maybe even get a glimpse of what's hiding beyond what we normally see.
It's such a cool journey,
Uh-huh.
looking into these strange parts of human experience. These stories, they make you ask more questions than they answer. And that's okay. Sometimes the most interesting stuff comes from just accepting the mystery and letting yourself be challenged by what you don't know.
Totally agree. It's not always about finding the perfect answer. It's about opening our minds to all the possibilities out there.
Yeah.
They make us question, think, wonder about what's really real.
Exactly. They remind us that reality might be a lot more flexible and changeable than we think, and that maybe there are other dimensions or realities existing right alongside us, and we only get these little glimpses of them in these weird moments.
And maybe, if we pay attention to these stories, if we listen to people who've experienced these unexplainable things, we can start to understand just how complex and amazing this universe really is.
That's a great way to put it. So we're coming to the end of our deep dive into these strange and unexplained accounts. But we hope you keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep your mind open to all the mysteries out there. Maybe you've had your own experiences that don't make sense or know of stories that challenge what you thought you knew about reality. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Remember, there's always something new to discover, something new to learn, and something new to wonder about. The adventure of exploration never really stops. And the more we welcome the unknown, the more we understand ourselves and this amazing universe we're all a part of.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm-hmm.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the edges of reality. You never know what you might find just around the corner from the everyday.